The death of Alexander the Great remains one of history's most tantalizing mysteries. At just 32 years old, the conqueror who had built an empire stretching from Greece to India suddenly fell ill after a banquet in Babylon. Within days, he was dead, but was it illness as some claim, or was it something far more sinister, poison perhaps, or even a carefully orchestrated assassination? The truth has been lost to time, leaving behind a puzzle that has fascinated historians for centuries. And Alexander's death is just one of many, from the untimely demise of Cleopatra to the baffling end of Attila the Hun. The deaths of ancient figures are shrouded in intrigue, speculation, and unanswered questions. These aren't just stories from the past, they're cold cases that continue to captivate us, offering a glimpse into the fragility of power and the enduring allure of the unknown. In this video, we'll dive into the shadows of history to uncover the secrets behind some of the most enigmatic deaths of ancient times. What really happened to these legendary figures? And why do their stories still haunt us today? Let's find out. Alexander the Great's death is a story that feels almost too dramatic to be real. Picture this: a man who had conquered vast swaths of the known world from Greece to Egypt, Persia to India, suddenly collapses after a lavish banquet in Babylon. He was just 32 years old at the height of his power, and yet within days he was gone. The official cause of death, fever, but whispers of foul play began almost immediately. Could it have been poison slipped into his wine? Some historians point to his close companions, like his general Antipater or even his wife Roxana, as potential suspects. Others suggest malaria or typhoid fever, diseases that were rampant in the region at the time. But here's the twist: Alexander's death didn't just mark the end of a life, it marked the beginning of chaos. His empire, built on his sheer force of will, fractured almost instantly. His generals, known as the Diadochi, turned on each other in a brutal struggle for power, carving up his conquests into rival kingdoms. The man who had united much of the ancient world left behind a legacy of division and mystery. And while we may never know the full truth of what happened in those final days in Babylon, one thing is certain: Alexander's death wasn't just the end of a conqueror, it was the unraveling of an empire. But Alexander isn't the only ancient figure whose death remains cloaked in uncertainty. Another legendary leader whose demise would echo through history met a fate just as enigmatic. Cleopatra's death is a story steeped in drama, intrigue, and conflicting narratives. The last pharaoh of Egypt, a woman who had captivated the likes of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, met her end in a way that has been romanticized and debated for centuries. The most famous version of her death comes from the Roman historian Plutarch, who claimed she died by the bite of an asp, a venomous snake, delivering a swift and dramatic end. But was it really suicide, as the story suggests, or was there more to her death than meets the eye? Some historians argue that Cleopatra's suicide was a carefully crafted act of defiance, a final statement of her autonomy in the face of Roman conquest. After all, she had lost everything. Her lover Mark Antony had fallen on his sword, and her kingdom was on the brink of being absorbed into the Roman Empire. By choosing death over capture, she may have sought to preserve her dignity and legacy. Yet others question this narrative. Could she have been murdered by Roman forces, perhaps on the orders of Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus? Octavian had every reason to eliminate her. She was a symbol of resistance, a living threat to his plans for total control. The cultural and political implications of Cleopatra's death were immense. Her demise marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a 300-year reign of Greek rulers in Egypt, and the beginning of Roman dominance in the region. It was a turning point in history, one that reshaped the ancient world. But the mystery of her final hours lingers. Was it a snake bite, a dagger, or something else entirely? The truth remains as elusive as the woman herself, and Cleopatra isn't the only ancient ruler whose death sparks debate. Another powerful leader whose end was just as controversial left behind a legacy shrouded in mystery and speculation. The assassination of Julius Caesar is one of history's most infamous betrayals, a moment that forever changed the course of Rome. On the Ides of March in 44 BC, Caesar, the man who had risen to become dictator for life, entered the Senate unaware of the deadly plot awaiting him. As he took his seat, a group of senators led by Brutus and Cassius surrounded him. In a brutal and coordinated attack, they stabbed him 23 times. The betrayal was personal. Brutus, once a close ally, was even said to be like a son to Caesar. The shockwaves of this act rippled far beyond the Senate floor. But why did they do it? The conspirators claimed they were acting to save the Roman Republic from tyranny. Caesar's growing power and his disregard for traditional republican norms had made him a threat to the established order. By eliminating him, they hoped to restore the balance of power and preserve the Republic. Yet their actions had the opposite effect. Caesar's death plunged Rome into chaos, sparking a series of civil wars that would ultimately lead to the rise of the Roman Empire under his adopted heir, Octavian, later known as Augustus. The assassination wasn't just a political act, it was a turning point in history. It marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of imperial rule, a shift that would shape the Western world for centuries to come. And while the conspirators may have believed they were acting for the greater good, their actions only hastened the very outcome they sought to prevent. Caesar's death is a stark reminder of how fragile power can be and how quickly the tides of history can turn. But he wasn't the only ancient leader whose demise would reshape the world. Another figure whose life and death were equally dramatic left behind a legacy that continues to intrigue us to this day. The story of Tutankhamun, the boy king of ancient Egypt, is one that has fascinated the world for centuries. Ascending to the throne at just 9 years old, Tutankhamun ruled during a tumultuous period in Egypt's history, a time when the kingdom was still recovering from the radical religious reforms of his father, Akhenaten. But it's not his reign that has captured the imagination of historians and the public alike. It's his untimely death at around 18 or 19 years old, and the mysteries that surround it. For decades, the cause of Tutankhamun's death was a subject of intense speculation. Early theories suggested he might have been murdered, perhaps by a blow to the head, as some believed a fracture in his skull indicated foul play. Others pointed to the possibility of an accident, like a chariot crash, given the injuries found on his mummified remains. But modern forensic science has shed new light on this ancient mystery. CT scans and DNA analysis revealed that Tutankhamun suffered from multiple health issues, including a severe leg fracture and malaria. These findings suggest that his death was likely the result of complications from these conditions, rather than a deliberate act of violence. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 by Howard Carter added another layer of intrigue to his story. Unlike many royal tombs which had been plundered over the centuries, Tutankhamun's burial chamber was found nearly intact, filled with treasures that offered a glimpse into the opulence of ancient Egypt. The golden mask, the chariots, the jewelry, all of it spoke to the wealth and power of a young king whose life was cut tragically short. This discovery not only reignited global interest in Egyptology, but also provided invaluable insights into the art, culture, and daily life of the ancient world. Yet, even with these advancements, questions remain. Why did Tutankhamun die so young? Was his death simply a tragic accident of fate, or were there other forces at play? The answers may never be fully known, but the mystery of the boy king continues to captivate us, a reminder of how much we still have to learn about the past. And Tutankhamun isn't the only ancient ruler whose death leaves us with more questions than answers. Another enigmatic figure whose demise has puzzled historians for centuries awaits our exploration. The death of Socrates is a story that transcends time, not just because of its dramatic nature, but because of the profound questions it raises about justice, morality, and the price of intellectual freedom. In Athens during the 5th century BC, Socrates was a figure both revered and reviled. Known for his relentless questioning and his commitment to seeking truth, he became a thorn in the side of the Athenian elite. His method of challenging assumptions and exposing contradictions earned him admirers, but it also made him enemies. In 399 BC, Socrates was put on trial, accused of corrupting the youth of Athens and impiety, essentially, of undermining the city's gods and traditions. The charges were politically charged, reflecting the tensions of a city still reeling from the Peloponnesian War and the rule of the 30 tyrants, a brutal oligarchy that had briefly overthrown Athenian democracy. Socrates, who had been associated with some of the oligarchs, became a convenient scapegoat for a society grappling with instability and fear. The trial itself was a spectacle. Socrates, true to his nature, refused to beg for mercy or compromise his principles. Instead, he defended his way of life, arguing that his philosophical inquiries were a service to the city, not a threat. When given the chance to propose an alternative to the death penalty, he famously suggested that Athens should reward him with free meals for life. His defiance only sealed his fate. The jury, unimpressed by his unrepentant stance, sentenced him to death by drinking hemlock, but was his execution justified? Historians and philosophers have debated this question for centuries. Some argue that Socrates was a victim of political persecution, a man whose ideas were too radical for his time. Others suggest that his trial was a legitimate response to the perceived threat he posed to Athenian society. What's undeniable is the irony of his death. A city that prided itself on democracy and free speech condemned one of its greatest thinkers for exercising those very principles. Socrates' legacy, however, outlived his execution. His teachings, preserved by his student Plato, laid the foundation for Western philosophy. His emphasis on critical thinking, self-examination, and the pursuit of truth continues to resonate today. In many ways, his death became a symbol of the eternal struggle between authority and intellectual freedom, a reminder of the cost of challenging the status quo. And Socrates isn't the only ancient figure whose death forces us to confront deep philosophical questions. Another thinker, whose life and demise were equally thought-provoking, invites us to explore the boundaries of belief, power, and human nature. The Fall of Nero, the last emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, is a tale that blurs the line between history and legend. Known for his extravagance, tyranny, and alleged role in the Great Fire of Rome, Nero's reign ended in chaos. By 68 AD, revolts had broken out across the empire, and even the Praetorian Guard, his personal protectors, turned against him. Facing certain death, Nero reportedly chose to take his own life, plunging a dagger into his throat as his enemies closed in. But is that the whole story? Some ancient sources, like the historian Suetonius, paint a vivid picture of Nero's final moments, describing him as a man consumed by fear and desperation. Yet there's another side to this story, one that refuses to die. Persistent rumors suggest that Nero didn't actually die that day. Instead, he may have staged his suicide to escape retribution, fleeing to the east where loyalists could hide him. These theories gained traction in the years following his supposed death, with several imposters claiming to be Nero and rallying support in his name. Could the emperor have orchestrated his own disappearance, leaving behind a carefully crafted myth of his demise? Nero's death, whether real or staged, marked the end of an era. His reign had been a roller coaster of excess and cruelty, but it also left an indelible mark on Roman culture. He was a patron of the arts, a performer who saw himself as a musician and actor, and his legacy is a mix of infamy and fascination. The myths surrounding his death only add to his enigmatic persona, turning him into a figure of both historical intrigue and popular imagination. But Nero isn't the only ruler whose death is shrouded in mystery and legend. Another ancient leader whose end is equally debated invites us to explore the thin line between fact and fiction in the annals of history. The death of Genghis Khan, the fearsome founder of the Mongol Empire, is as shrouded in secrecy as the man himself. After uniting the nomadic tribes of the steppe and forging one of the largest empires in history, Khan's final days remain a puzzle. Some accounts claim he died in battle, struck down by an enemy's arrow. Others suggest he succumbed to illness, perhaps a fever or complications from a fall. But the most intriguing aspect of his death isn't how he died, it's what happened afterward. Following his passing in 1227, Genghis Khan's body was reportedly taken to a secret location, buried in an unmarked grave to prevent desecration. The exact site of his tomb has never been found despite centuries of searching. Legend has it that the soldiers who carried out his burial were executed to ensure the secret died with them. Even the river that flowed near his grave was diverted, its waters rerouted to erase any trace of the burial. This level of secrecy wasn't just about protecting his remains, it was about preserving his legacy. Genghis Khan wasn't just a conqueror, he was a symbol of unity and power, a figure whose influence extended far beyond his lifetime. The search for his tomb has become a modern-day quest, with archaeologists and historians using everything from satellite imagery to ground-penetrating radar in hopes of uncovering the truth. Some believe the tomb could hold untold treasures, artifacts that would shed light on the Mongol Empire's vast wealth and culture. Others see it as a chance to finally solve one of history's greatest mysteries. But even if the tomb is found, the enigma of Genghis Khan's death will likely endure. His life and legacy are so intertwined with myth and legend that separating fact from fiction may prove impossible. Genghis Khan's death wasn't just the end of a man, it was the beginning of a legend. His empire continued to expand under his descendants, shaping the course of history across Asia and Europe. Yet, the mystery of his burial site reminds us that even the most powerful figures are, in the end, human. Their stories, no matter how grand, are often marked by questions that outlive them. And Genghis Khan isn't the only conqueror whose death leaves us with more questions than answers. Another legendary figure, whose demise is equally cloaked in mystery, awaits our exploration. The assassination of Philip Roman II of Macedon is a story of ambition, betrayal, and the high stakes of power in the ancient world. As the father of Alexander the Great, Philip was a formidable leader in his own right, having transformed Macedonia from a fractured kingdom into a dominant military force. But his life came to a sudden and violent end in 336 BC during the celebration of his daughter's wedding. As Philip entered the theater in Aegae, a man named Pausanias, one of his own bodyguards, stepped forward and stabbed him to death. The murder sent shockwaves through the kingdom, leaving behind a web of intrigue that historians are still unraveling today. Who was behind the assassination? Pausanias acted alone, but many believe he was merely a pawn in a larger conspiracy. Some theories point to Olympias, Philip's estranged wife and Alexander's mother, who may have seen Philip's death as a way to secure her son's ascent to the throne. Others suggest that Alexander himself could have been involved, eager to claim power before his father's plans for further conquests sidelined him. Then there's the possibility of foreign involvement, Persian agents, perhaps, seeking to destabilize Macedonia before Philip could launch his planned invasion of their empire. The truth remains elusive, but what's clear is that Philip's death was a turning point in history. With Philip gone, Alexander inherited not just the throne, but also the momentum of his father's ambitions. Philip had laid the groundwork for a unified Greece and a campaign against Persia, and Alexander would take those plans to unprecedented heights. In many ways, Philip's assassination was the spark that ignited Alexander's meteoric rise, setting the stage for one of the most extraordinary chapters in ancient history. Yet, it also raises a haunting question: how different might the world have been if Philip had lived? Would Alexander have become the legend we know today, or would his father's shadow have eclipsed his potential? Philip's death reminds us that the line between greatness and tragedy is often razor-thin. His assassination wasn't just the end of a king, it was the beginning of an empire. But he wasn't the only ancient leader whose death reshaped the course of history. Another figure whose demise was equally steeped in political intrigue invites us to explore the darker side of power and ambition. The story of Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who famously led his army, complete with war elephants across the Alps to challenge Rome, is one of history's most epic tales of strategy and defiance. But while his life was marked by brilliance and daring, his death was a quieter, more tragic affair shrouded in betrayal and mystery. After years of evading Roman capture, Hannibal found himself cornered in the kingdom of Bithynia in modern-day Turkey. It was here, in 183 BC, that the man who had once brought Rome to its knees met his end. The circumstances of Hannibal's death are as debated as his life was dramatic. Some accounts claim he chose to take his own life by drinking poison, a final act of defiance to avoid falling into Roman hands. Others suggest he was betrayed by the Bithynian king, Prusias, who had promised him sanctuary but ultimately handed him over to the Romans. And then there's the theory that he was assassinated, perhaps by Roman agents who saw him as a lingering threat even in exile. Whatever the truth, Hannibal's death marked the end of an era. Hannibal's legacy, however, outlived him. His audacious campaigns during the Second Punic War, particularly his victory at the Battle of Cannae, are still studied in military academies today as masterclasses in strategy and tactics. He was a man who understood the psychology of his enemies, using surprise and ingenuity to outmaneuver forces far larger than his own. Yet, despite his brilliance, he couldn't overcome the sheer might and resilience of Rome. His death symbolized the final collapse of Carthaginian resistance, sealing Rome's dominance in the Mediterranean. But Hannibal's story isn't just about battles and betrayal, it's about the cost of greatness. He spent much of his life as a fugitive, constantly on the run, his genius both his greatest strength and his greatest burden. In the end, even his death became a reflection of his lifelong struggle. A man who had defied the odds time and again, only to be undone by the very forces he had fought so hard to resist. Hannibal's death wasn't just the end of a general, it was the end of a dream. His passing marked the closing chapter of Carthage's rivalry with Rome, a rivalry that had shaped the ancient world. Yet, even in death, Hannibal remains a figure of fascination, a reminder of how one man's ambition can alter the course of history. And Hannibal isn't the only military leader whose death raises questions about loyalty, legacy, and the price of power. Another commander whose demise was equally controversial invites us to explore the fine line between heroism and tragedy. The story of Agrippina the Younger is one of ambition, power, and a chilling betrayal that would shock even the most hardened observers of Roman politics. As the mother of Emperor Nero, Agrippina wielded immense influence, shaping the early years of her son's reign. But her relationship with Nero was far from simple. It was a volatile mix of love, manipulation, and ultimately deadly conflict. Agrippina had worked tirelessly to secure Nero's place on the throne, even orchestrating the poisoning of her own husband, Emperor Claudius, to clear the way for her son. Yet, as Nero grew more independent, he began to see his mother not as an ally but as a threat. The accounts of Agrippina's death are as dramatic as they are disturbing. According to the historian Tacitus, Nero initially tried to kill her by arranging a boating accident. The plan was elaborate, a collapsible ship designed to sink, drowning Agrippina in the process. But the scheme failed. Agrippina, a strong swimmer, survived the wreck and made it to shore. When Nero learned of her survival, he panicked. Realizing that his mother would now see him as an enemy, he resorted to a more direct approach. He sent assassins to her villa where they brutally stabbed her to death. It's said that her final words were a grim acknowledgement of her fate. "Strike here," she reportedly told her killers, pointing to her womb. For this bore Nero. The murder of Agrippina sent shockwaves through Rome. It wasn't just the act itself that horrified the public, it was the fact that a son had ordered the death of his own mother, a crime that violated both Roman law and societal norms. Nero's reputation never fully recovered from the scandal. While he tried to justify the act by claiming Agrippina had plotted against him, many saw it as the ultimate betrayal, a sign of his growing tyranny. Agrippina's death also had profound implications for the Roman Empire. With her gone, Nero's rule became increasingly erratic, marked by extravagance, paranoia, and cruelty. The stability she had worked so hard to maintain began to unravel, setting the stage for the chaos that would eventually lead to Nero's downfall. Her story is a stark reminder of the precarious nature of power in ancient Rome, where even the closest family ties could be severed by ambition and fear. But Agrippina isn't the only powerful woman from antiquity whose death remains shrouded in mystery. Another figure whose life and demise were equally dramatic invites us to explore the complexities of power, loyalty, and betrayal in the ancient world. The death of Attila the Hun is as enigmatic as the man himself. Known as the Scourge of God, Attila was a figure who struck terror into the hearts of both the Roman Empire and the barbarian tribes of Europe. His empire stretched from the steppes of Central Asia to the heart of modern-day Germany, built on a foundation of relentless conquest and ruthless ambition. Yet in 453 AD, this fearsome leader met an end that was as sudden as it was mysterious. On the night of his death, Attila was celebrating his marriage to a young woman named Ildiko. According to the historian Priscus, who provided one of the few contemporary accounts of the event, the festivities were lavish, filled with feasting and drinking. But the next morning, Attila was found dead in his bed, his bride weeping beside him. The official explanation, a severe nosebleed, which caused him to choke on his own blood as he slept. It was a surprisingly mundane end for a man whose life had been anything but ordinary. Yet not everyone was convinced by this explanation. Almost immediately, whispers of foul play began to circulate. Some speculated that Ildiko herself might have poisoned Attila, perhaps as an act of revenge or as part of a larger conspiracy. Others suggested that his death was the result of a plot by his own generals, who may have grown weary of his relentless campaigns and the strain they placed on their resources. Even the Romans, who had long feared Attila, were suspected of orchestrating his demise. The cultural impact of Attila's death was profound. Without his leadership, the Hunnic Empire quickly unraveled. The tribes that had once been united under his command fractured, and within a few years, the empire that had once threatened Rome was little more than a memory. Attila's death marked the end of an era, a turning point in the history of Europe. But the story of Attila doesn't end with his death. Over the centuries, his legacy has been shaped by myth and legend. In some traditions, he is remembered as a brutal tyrant, a symbol of destruction and chaos. In others, he is celebrated as a great warrior, a leader who brought glory to his people. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Attila was a complex figure, a man whose life and death continue to fascinate us, not just for what they reveal about him, but for what they tell us about the world he inhabited. And Attila isn't the only ancient figure whose death is steeped in mystery and myth. Another legendary leader whose demise has sparked centuries of speculation invites us to explore the blurred line between history and legend. The assassination of Caligula, one of Rome's most notorious emperors, is a story of tyranny, betrayal, and the volatile nature of absolute power. Known for his erratic behavior and brutal reign, Caligula's rule was marked by extravagance, cruelty, and a growing list of enemies. By 41 AD, just 4 years into his reign, the emperor had alienated nearly everyone around him: senators, soldiers, and even members of his own family. It was only a matter of time before someone decided to act. The conspiracy to kill Caligula was led by Cassius Chaerea, a high-ranking officer in the Praetorian Guard who had endured years of humiliation at the emperor's hands. Caligula had mocked Chaerea's voice, calling it effeminate, and subjected him to constant ridicule. For Chaerea, the assassination wasn't just about political ambition, it was personal. On January 24, 41 AD, as Caligula was leaving a series of games at the Palatine Hill, Chaerea and his fellow conspirators struck. They cornered the emperor in a secluded corridor and stabbed him repeatedly, ensuring he had no chance of survival. But the chaos didn't end with Caligula's death. In the immediate aftermath, the conspirators also killed his wife, Caesonia, and their infant daughter, Julia Drusilla, to eliminate any potential heirs. The Roman Senate, emboldened by the assassination, briefly considered restoring the Republic, but the Praetorian Guard had other plans. They quickly declared Caligula's uncle, Claudius, as the new emperor, ensuring the continuation of imperial rule. The assassination, far from bringing stability, only deepened the political turmoil in Rome. Caligula's reign and death left a lasting mark on Roman culture. His name became synonymous with madness and excess, a cautionary tale of what happens when power goes unchecked. Stories of his alleged crimes, from declaring himself a god to supposedly planning to make his horse a consul, have been passed down through history, though many of these tales are likely exaggerated or outright fabricated. The myths surrounding his death are equally dramatic, with some accounts claiming he was killed while performing in a play, adding a theatrical twist to his already sensational life. The assassination of Caligula wasn't just the end of a tyrant, it was a turning point in Roman history. It exposed the fragility of imperial power and the dangers of unchecked authority. Yet, it also highlighted the resilience of the Roman system, which managed to survive even the most chaotic transitions. But Caligula isn't the only ruler whose death was steeped in drama and intrigue. Another emperor whose demise was equally shocking invites us to explore the darker side of Roman politics and the lengths to which people would go to seize power. The story of Boudicca, the warrior queen of the Iceni tribe, is one of defiance, courage, and tragedy. In the 1st century AD, as Roman forces tightened their grip on Britain, Boudicca emerged as a symbol of resistance, rallying her people against the invaders. Her rebellion was fierce and nearly successful. She led her army to destroy Roman settlements, including Londinium, modern-day London, leaving a trail of devastation in her wake. But her uprising, though bold, was short-lived. The Romans, under the command of Governor Suetonius Paulinus, regrouped and confronted Boudicca's forces in a decisive battle. The details of that final clash are murky, but the outcome was clear. Boudicca's army was defeated, and her dream of driving the Romans from Britain was crushed. What happened to Boudicca after the battle is one of history's enduring mysteries. The Roman historian Tacitus claims she took her own life, choosing death over capture. According to his account, she poisoned herself, a final act of defiance against the empire that had oppressed her people. Another Roman historian, Cassius Dio, offers a different version, suggesting she fell ill and died shortly after the battle. Both accounts agree on one thing: Boudicca's death marked the end of her rebellion and the collapse of Celtic resistance to Roman rule. Boudicca's legacy, however, outlived her defeat. She became a symbol of resistance and resilience, a figure who stood against overwhelming odds in defense of her people's freedom. Her story has been romanticized over the centuries, transforming her into a national hero in British folklore. Statues of Boudicca, often depicted riding a chariot with her daughters by her side, stand as reminders of her courage and the price she paid for her defiance. The cultural impact of Boudicca's death was profound. It signaled the end of an era for the Celtic tribes of Britain, who would never again mount a significant challenge to Roman dominance. The Romans, emboldened by their victory, continued to expand their control, reshaping the island's culture, language, and governance. Yet, Boudicca's spirit endured, inspiring future generations to fight for their independence and identity. But Boudicca isn't the only ancient leader whose death marked the end of an era. Another figure whose demise was equally symbolic invites us to explore the complexities of power, resistance, and legacy in the ancient world. The murder of Cicero, one of Rome's greatest orators and philosophers, is a story that intertwines intellect, politics, and betrayal. Known for his eloquence and his unwavering defense of the Roman Republic, Cicero was a man who believed in the power of words over swords. Yet, in the end, it was the sword that silenced him. His death in 43 BC was not just the end of a life, it was a chilling symbol of the collapse of the republic he had fought so hard to preserve. Cicero's downfall came during the turbulent years following the assassination of Julius Caesar. As Rome descended into chaos with factions vying for power, Cicero found himself caught in the crossfire. He had long been a vocal critic of Mark Antony, Caesar's former ally, whose ambitions Cicero saw as a threat to the Republic. In a series of scathing speeches known as the Philippics, Cicero denounced Antony, calling him a tyrant and a danger to Rome. These speeches made Cicero a hero to some, but a mortal enemy to Antony. When the Second Triumvirate, a political alliance between Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, took control of Rome, Cicero's fate was sealed. Antony demanded Cicero's death as part of the proscriptions, a brutal purge of political enemies. Cicero, knowing his life was in danger, attempted to flee, but he was captured by Antony's soldiers. According to the historian Plutarch, Cicero met his end with dignity. As the soldiers approached, he reportedly stretched out his neck, offering it to the blade, and said, "There is nothing proper about what you are doing, soldier, but do try to kill me properly." The assassination of Cicero sent shockwaves through Rome. His death was more than just the loss of a statesman, it was the death of an ideal. Cicero had been a staunch defender of the Republic, a voice of reason in a time of chaos. With his passing, the last vestiges of republican governance crumbled, paving the way for the rise of imperial rule under Octavian, later known as Augustus. Yet Cicero's legacy endured. His writings on philosophy, politics, and rhetoric became foundational texts for Western thought. Works like On the Republic and On Duties explored themes of justice, morality, and the responsibilities of leadership, ideas that continue to resonate today. His letters, which offer a vivid glimpse into the political and social life of ancient Rome, remain invaluable to historians. In many ways, Cicero's voice outlived him, a testament to the enduring power of ideas. But Cicero isn't the only intellectual whose death raises profound questions about the cost of speaking truth to power. Another thinker, whose life and demise were equally dramatic, invites us to explore the fragile intersection of philosophy and politics in the ancient world. The death of Ramses III, one of ancient Egypt's most formidable pharaohs, is a story that reads like a royal thriller. Known for his military prowess and ambitious building projects, Ramses III ruled during a time of both prosperity and tension. But his reign came to a shocking end in 1155 BC, not on the battlefield or from natural causes, but in a palace conspiracy that has fascinated historians for centuries. The evidence of his assassination comes from an unlikely source, his own mummy. When modern researchers examined Ramses III remains, they discovered something startling. Deep cuts on his throat suggested he had been slashed with a sharp blade, likely in a surprise attack. Further analysis revealed that his big toe had been severed, possibly in a desperate struggle. These injuries pointed to a violent death, one that had been carefully concealed by those who survived him. But who wanted Ramses III dead? The answer lies in a plot known as the Harem Conspiracy, a scheme orchestrated by members of his own household. According to ancient court documents, one of his secondary wives, Ti, sought to place her son, Pentuer, on the throne. To achieve this, she enlisted the help of high-ranking officials, including palace guards and even members of the royal court. The conspirators planned to kill Ramses III during a festival, using the chaos of the celebrations to mask their actions. The plot, however, didn't end with the pharaoh's death. The conspirators were eventually uncovered, and a series of trials followed. The punishments were severe. Some were forced to take their own lives, while others were executed. Pentuer, the would-be usurper, was also implicated, though his exact fate remains unclear. Some believe he was allowed to commit suicide, while others suggest he was executed alongside the other conspirators. The assassination of Ramses III had far-reaching consequences for Egypt. His death marked the beginning of the decline of the New Kingdom, a period of instability that would eventually lead to the fragmentation of Egyptian power. The Harem Conspiracy also exposed the vulnerabilities of even the most powerful rulers, revealing how palace intrigue could unravel the fabric of an empire. Yet, Ramses III's story isn't just about betrayal and power struggles. It's a reminder of how even the mightiest can fall. His death, preserved in the forensic evidence of his mummy, offers a rare glimpse into the personal and political dangers faced by ancient rulers. And while his reign ended in tragedy, his legacy endures, a testament to the complexities of leadership in a world where loyalty was never guaranteed. But Ramses III isn't the only ancient leader whose death was marked by conspiracy and intrigue. Another ruler whose demise was equally dramatic invites us to explore the darker side of power and ambition in the ancient world. The fall of Darius III, the last king of the mighty Achaemenid Empire, is a story of ambition, betrayal, and the relentless march of history. Once the ruler of an empire that stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, Darius found himself facing an unstoppable force, Alexander the Great. Their clash wasn't just a battle of armies, it was a collision of two worlds, one ancient and established, the other young and hungry for conquest. Darius's reign began with promise. He inherited an empire that, while vast, was also burdened by internal strife and corruption. His early efforts to stabilize the realm were commendable, but they were no match for the military genius of Alexander. The two leaders first met on the battlefield at Issus in 333 BC, where Darius suffered a humiliating defeat. Despite outnumbering Alexander's forces, Darius's army was outmaneuvered, and he was forced to flee, leaving behind his family, who were captured by Alexander. The final blow came at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BC. Once again, Darius's forces were overwhelmed by Alexander's tactics. This time, the defeat was catastrophic. Darius fled the battlefield, but his empire was crumbling around him. As Alexander's armies advanced, Darius's own allies began to turn against him. In a desperate bid to regroup, he retreated eastward, but his fate was sealed. The circumstances of Darius's death are as dramatic as his life. In 330 BC, as he fled from Alexander's relentless pursuit, Darius was betrayed by his own satraps or regional governors. Bessus, one of his most trusted commanders, orchestrated a coup, capturing Darius and declaring himself the new king. According to ancient sources, Darius was either killed by Bessus's men or left to die from his wounds. Some accounts suggest that Alexander, upon finding Darius's body, treated it with respect, honoring him as a fallen king. Darius's death marked the end of the Achaemenid Empire, a dynasty that had ruled for over 2 centuries. For Alexander, it was a moment of triumph, solidifying his claim as the new ruler of Persia. But it also raised questions about the nature of power and loyalty. Darius's downfall wasn't just the result of Alexander's brilliance, it was also a consequence of the internal divisions and betrayals that had weakened his empire from within. The legacy of Darius III is a complex one. He is often remembered as the king who lost an empire, but his story is also a reminder of the fragility of power. His reign, though short, was a pivotal chapter in the history of the ancient world, marking the transition from Persian dominance to the rise of Hellenistic influence. And while his death signaled the end of an era, it also paved the way for a new one as Alexander's conquests reshaped the map of the ancient world. But Darius isn't the only ancient leader whose death marked a turning point in history. Another figure whose demise was equally transformative invites us to explore the delicate balance between power, ambition, and the forces that shape the course of civilizations. The death of Hypatia, the brilliant philosopher and mathematician of Alexandria, is a story that intertwines intellect, politics, and tragedy. In a city known for its vibrant intellectual life, Hypatia stood out as a beacon of knowledge, teaching philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy to students from across the ancient world. Her lectures drew crowds, and her wisdom earned her respect even in a society dominated by men. But her brilliance also made her a target in a time of growing religious and political unrest. Alexandria in the early 5th century was a city in turmoil. The rise of Christianity was reshaping the cultural and political landscape, often clashing with the traditional pagan and intellectual elite. Hypatia, a pagan herself, became a symbol of the old order, a reminder of a world where reason and philosophy held sway. Her close ties to Orstes, the Roman prefect of Alexandria, further complicated her position. Orstes was locked in a bitter power struggle with Cyril, the city's Christian bishop, and Hypatia's influence made her a pawn in their conflict. The events leading to Hypatia's death are as harrowing as they are tragic. In 415 AD, a mob of Christian zealots, incited by rumors and propaganda, dragged her from her chariot as she traveled through the city. They stripped her, beat her, and ultimately killed her, using broken pottery to mutilate her body. Her remains were then burned, a brutal attempt to erase her legacy. The murder shocked Alexandria and sent ripples across the ancient world. Hypatia's death wasn't just the loss of a scholar, it was a turning point in the history of intellectual freedom. Her murder marked the decline of Alexandria as a center of learning and the rise of religious intolerance. The city, once a melting pot of ideas and cultures, began to fracture under the weight of sectarian violence. Hypatia's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers faced by those who dare to challenge the status quo. Yet her legacy endured. Hypatia is remembered not just as a victim, but as a symbol of courage and intellectual pursuit. Her life and work continue to inspire scholars and thinkers, a testament to the enduring power of knowledge. In many ways, her death was a catalyst, sparking conversations about the role of women in academia, the clash between faith and reason, and the importance of protecting intellectual freedom. Hypatia's story is a stark reminder of how fragile the pursuit of truth can be in the face of political and religious extremism. but she isn't the only ancient figure whose death was shaped by the turbulent currents of their time. Another thinker whose demise was equally politically charged invites us to explore the complex relationship between power, ideology, and the cost of dissent. The assassination of Commodus, the Roman emperor who famously believed himself to be the reincarnation of Hercules, is a tale of madness, betrayal, and the dangerous allure of absolute power. Known for his erratic behavior and increasingly tyrannical rule, Commodus's reign was marked by extravagance, cruelty, and a growing list of enemies. By the time of his death in 192 AD, even those closest to him had turned against him, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic downfalls in Roman history. Commodus's descent into madness began early in his reign. Unlike his father, the revered Marcus Aurelius, Commodus showed little interest in governance or philosophy. Instead, he indulged in gladiatorial combat, often fighting in the arena himself, much to the dismay of the Roman elite. He renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana after himself, declared himself a living god, and demanded worship from his subjects. His erratic decisions and brutal purges alienated the Senate, the military, and even members of his own household. The conspiracy to kill Commodus was led by his inner circle, including his mistress Marcia and his chamberlain Eclectus. They were joined by the Praetorian prefect, Letus, who had grown disillusioned with the emperor's increasingly unpredictable behavior. The plan was simple but bold: poison Commodus's food. When the poison failed to kill him quickly, they enlisted a wrestler named Narcissus to strangle him in his bath. The emperor, who had once fancied himself a demigod, met his end in the most humiliating of circumstances. Commodus's death plunged Rome into chaos. The Senate immediately declared him a public enemy, erasing his name from public records and destroying his statues. The Praetorian Guard, now without a clear leader, auctioned off the throne to the highest bidder, sparking a year of civil war known as the Year of the Five Emperors. The stability that Marcus Aurelius had worked so hard to maintain was shattered, and Rome teetered on the brink of collapse. The cultural impact of Commodus's reign was profound. His excesses and delusions became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power. Stories of his alleged crimes, from slaughtering exotic animals in the arena to forcing senators to fight as gladiators, have been passed down through history, though many of these tales are likely exaggerated. The myths surrounding his death are equally dramatic, with some accounts claiming he was killed while practicing his gladiatorial skills, adding a final, ironic twist to his already sensational life. Commodus's assassination wasn't just the end of a tyrant, it was a turning point in Roman history. It exposed the fragility of imperial power and the dangers of placing too much authority in the hands of one individual. Yet, it also highlighted the resilience of the Roman system, which managed to survive even the most chaotic transitions. But Commodus isn't the only ruler whose death was steeped in drama and intrigue. Another emperor whose demise was equally shocking invites us to explore the darker side of Roman politics and the lengths to which people would go to seize power. The death of Cyrus the Great, the visionary founder of the Persian Empire, is a story that blends triumph, tragedy, and enduring mystery. Known as one of history's most benevolent conquerors, Cyrus built an empire that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Indus River, uniting diverse peoples under a single rule. His reign was marked by tolerance, innovation, and a respect for the cultures he absorbed into his empire. Yet, for all his achievements, the circumstances of his death remain shrouded in uncertainty, leaving historians to piece together the fragments of his final days. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, Cyrus met his end in battle against the Massagetae, a nomadic tribe led by Queen Tomaris. The story goes that Cyrus, seeking to expand his empire further, launched a campaign against the Massagetae only to fall into a trap. Tomiris, enraged by the death of her son in the conflict, vowed revenge. In a fierce battle, Cyrus was reportedly killed, and Tomiris, in a gruesome act of retribution, is said to have plunged his severed head into a vessel of blood, declaring, "I promised to give you your fill of blood, and now I fulfill that promise." It's a dramatic tale, one that paints Cyrus's death as the price of his ambition. But not all accounts agree. Another version, recorded by the historian Ctesias, suggests that Cyrus died not in battle, but from wounds sustained during a campaign against the Dervises, another Central Asian tribe. In this version, Cyrus was gravely injured in combat and died days later, surrounded by his loyal companions. Still others propose that Cyrus succumbed to illness, a more mundane but equally plausible end for a man who had spent decades leading his armies across vast and unforgiving landscapes. The cultural significance of Cyrus's death cannot be overstated. His passing marked the end of an era, but his legacy endured. The Persian Empire he founded continued to thrive under his successors, becoming one of the most powerful and influential civilizations of the ancient world. Cyrus's policies of tolerance and respect for local customs set a precedent for future rulers, and his famous cylinder, often hailed as one of the first charters of human rights, remains a symbol of his enlightened leadership. Yet his death also left a void. Without Cyrus's unifying presence, the empire faced challenges in maintaining the delicate balance he had established. His successors, while capable, lacked his vision and diplomatic finesse, leading to periods of instability and conflict. The story of Cyrus's death is not just about the end of a great leader. It's about the fragility of empires and the enduring impact of one man's legacy. But Cyrus the Great isn't the only ancient figure whose death remains a mystery. Another leader whose demise was equally enigmatic invites us to explore the shadows of history and the secrets they hold. The assassination of Pompey the Great is a story of ambition, betrayal, and the brutal realities of Roman politics. Once one of the most powerful men in the Republic, Pompey had been a celebrated general, a master strategist, and a key player in the triumvirate that ruled Rome alongside Julius Caesar and Crassus. But by 48 BC, his fortunes had taken a dramatic turn. Defeated by Caesar at the Battle of Pharsalus, Pompey fled to Egypt, seeking refuge and hoping to regroup. Instead, he walked into a trap. As Pompey stepped ashore near Pelusium, he was met not by allies but by assassins. The young pharaoh Ptolemy Roman XIII, eager to curry favor with Caesar, had ordered Pompey's death. According to the historian Plutarch, Pompey was stabbed to death by a Roman officer named Lucius Septimius, who had once served under him. The betrayal was deeply personal. Pompey recognized his killer and reportedly quoted a line from Sophocles, "Even in a foreign land, a noble man finds honor." His final moments were a stark contrast to the glory he had once known. The political motivations behind Pompey's murder were as calculated as they were ruthless. Ptolemy and his advisors saw Pompey's death as a way to secure Caesar's goodwill, believing it would strengthen their position in Egypt's ongoing civil war. But the act backfired. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria and was presented with Pompey's severed head, he was reportedly horrified. Far from being pleased, he saw the murder as a dishonorable act and used it as a pretext to intervene in Egyptian affairs, ultimately siding with Cleopatra in her struggle for the throne. Pompey's death had far-reaching consequences for Rome. It marked the end of any serious opposition to Caesar's rise to power, paving the way for his eventual dictatorship. The Republic, already weakened by years of civil war, was now on the brink of collapse. Pompey's assassination wasn't just the death of a general, it was the death of an era. Yet Pompey's legacy extends beyond his tragic end. His military campaigns, from his victories in the East to his role in suppressing piracy in the Mediterranean, left an indelible mark on Roman history. He was a man who shaped the world he lived in, even if he couldn't control the forces that ultimately brought him down. His story is a reminder of how quickly fortunes can change in the cutthroat world of politics, where loyalty is fleeting and power is everything. But Pompey isn't the only ancient figure whose death was shaped by the turbulent currents of political ambition. Another leader whose demise was equally charged with intrigue invites us to explore the darker side of power and the lengths to which people will go to secure it. The story of Zenobia, the warrior queen of Palmyra, is one of defiance, ambition, and the high cost of challenging an empire. In the 3rd century AD, Zenobia rose to power in the desert city of Palmyra, located in modern-day Syria. Under her rule, Palmyra became a thriving center of trade and culture, and Zenobia herself emerged as a formidable leader. But her ambitions didn't stop at the borders of her city. She sought to expand her realm, capturing territories from the Roman Empire and declaring herself Empress of the East. For a time, it seemed she might succeed in carving out her own empire, but her defiance would ultimately lead to her downfall. The circumstances of Zenobia's death are as contested as her life was dramatic. Some accounts suggest she was captured by the Roman Emperor Aurelian after her forces were defeated in battle. According to these sources, she was taken to Rome as a prisoner, paraded through the streets in golden chains during Aurelian's triumph, and later lived out her days in exile. It's a humiliating end for a queen who had once dared to challenge Rome itself, but not all historians agree. Other accounts claim Zenobia chose death over captivity, taking her own life to avoid the shame of being paraded as a trophy. This version of events paints her as a tragic heroine, a woman who refused to bow to her conquerors even in death. Still, others suggest she may have been executed by the Romans, her defiance deemed too dangerous to let her live. The truth remains elusive, lost in the sands of time and the biases of ancient historians. Zenobia's death, however, was more than just the end of a queen. It was a turning point in the history of the Roman Empire. Her rebellion had exposed the fragility of Roman control in the eastern provinces, and her defeat marked the reassertion of imperial authority, yet her legacy endured. Zenobia became a symbol of resistance, a figure who dared to defy one of the most powerful empires in history. Her story has inspired countless retellings, from medieval chronicles to modern novels, each adding to the myth of the warrior queen who stood against Rome. The cultural impact of Zenobia's defiance is profound. She represents the struggle for autonomy and the courage to challenge overwhelming odds. Her life and death remind us that even in the face of defeat, the act of resistance can leave an indelible mark on history. Zenobia's story is not just about a queen who lost, it's about a woman who dared to dream of something greater. But Zenobia isn't the only powerful woman from antiquity whose death remains shrouded in mystery. Another queen whose life was equally dramatic and whose demise is equally debated invites us to explore the complexities of power, ambition, and the price of defiance. The death of Lucius Cornelius Sulla, one of Rome's most controversial figures, is a story of power, ambition, and the unpredictable nature of politics. Known as the man who reshaped the Roman Republic through his dictatorship, Sulla was a figure who inspired both fear and admiration. His reforms, aimed at restoring the authority of the Senate, came at a steep cost: civil war, proscriptions, and a legacy of violence. But his final days were marked not by the chaos he had unleashed, but by a quiet, almost enigmatic end that has puzzled historians for centuries. Sulla's death in 78 BC came after he had voluntarily stepped down from his dictatorship, a rare act in Roman history. He retired to his villa in Campania, where he spent his final years writing his memoirs and reflecting on his tumultuous career. According to the historian Plutarch, Sulla's death was sudden and unexpected. He fell ill with a mysterious disease described as a combination of fever and a severe skin condition, which some ancient sources claimed was a form of divine punishment for his ruthless actions. Others suggest it may have been liver failure, a result of his notorious indulgence in wine and excess, but the circumstances of Sulla's death are only part of the story. What makes his passing so intriguing are the myths and rumors that surround it. Some accounts claim that in his final moments, Sulla had a vision of his own funeral, complete with a grand procession and the adoration of the Roman people. Whether this was a moment of clarity or the delusion of a dying man, it speaks to the complexity of his character, a man who craved both power and recognition even in death. The cultural impact of Sulla's reign and death cannot be overstated. His dictatorship marked a turning point in Roman history, setting a precedent for the rise of strongmen like Julius Caesar. His reforms, though intended to stabilize the Republic, ultimately weakened it, creating the conditions for the civil wars that would follow. Sulla's death left a power vacuum, and the political chaos that ensued would shape the course of Roman history for decades to come. Yet, Sulla's legacy is not just one of destruction. He was a man of contradictions, a reformer who used violence to achieve his goals, a dictator who relinquished power voluntarily, and a figure whose life and death continue to fascinate us. His story is a reminder of how fragile political systems can be, and how the actions of one individual can ripple through history, leaving a legacy that is both profound and deeply contested. But Sulla isn't the only Roman leader whose death was steeped in drama and intrigue. Another ruler whose demise was equally transformative invites us to explore the delicate balance between power, ambition, and the forces that shape the course of civilizations. The Death of Mithridates VI, the King of Pontus, is a story that feels almost too dramatic to be true, a tale of defiance, intrigue, and a man who became a legend in his own time. Known as the Poison King, Mithridates was a thorn in Rome's side for decades, leading a series of rebellions that tested the might of the Roman Republic. His mastery of poisons and antidotes became the stuff of legend, earning him a reputation as a man who could survive even the deadliest of plots. But in the end, it wasn't poison that brought him down, it was betrayal. Mithridates' final days were marked by desperation. After years of fighting Rome, his forces were dwindling and his allies were turning against him. By 63 BC, he found himself cornered in his fortress at Panticapaeum in modern-day Crimea. Facing capture by the Romans, Mithridates made a fateful decision. According to the historian Appian, he attempted to take his own life by poison, a final act of defiance against his enemies. But here's the twist: the poison didn't work. Years of building up an immunity to toxins had rendered him resistant to the very substances he had once wielded as weapons. In a final, desperate act, he ordered a loyal servant to kill him with a sword. Yet, not all accounts agree. Some ancient sources suggest that Mithridates was betrayed by his own son, Pharnaces Roman II, who sought to curry favor with Rome by delivering his father's head. Others claim that his death was the result of a conspiracy among his generals, who saw no future in continuing the fight. The truth may never be fully known, but what's clear is that Mithridates' death marked the end of an era. His resistance to Rome had been a defining feature of the late Republic, and his passing signaled the collapse of one of Rome's most formidable adversaries. The cultural significance of Mithridates' death cannot be overstated. He was a symbol of resistance, a man who dared to challenge the might of Rome and nearly succeeded. His mastery of poisons and his ability to outwit his enemies made him a figure of both fear and admiration. Even in death, his legacy endured. The term Mithridatism, the practice of building immunity to poison by consuming small doses, is named after him, a testament to his enduring influence. Mithridates' death wasn't just the end of a king, it was the end of a dream. His vision of a Pontic empire free from Roman domination died with him, and his kingdom was absorbed into the Roman Republic. Yet his story continues to captivate us, a reminder of how one man's defiance can leave an indelible mark on history. But Mithridates isn't the only ancient figure whose death remains shrouded in mystery. Another leader whose demise was equally dramatic and whose legacy is equally debated invites us to explore the shadows of history and the secrets they hold. From the sudden collapse of Alexander the Great to the brutal assassination of Julius Caesar, the deaths of these ancient figures are more than just historical footnotes. They're windows into the fragile nature of power and the timeless complexities of human ambition. Each story we've explored today is a reminder that even the most legendary lives are often marked by uncertainty, intrigue, and unanswered questions. Whether it's the poison that may have ended Mithridates' defiance or the betrayal that silenced Pompey the Great, these mysteries continue to captivate us, not just for what they reveal about the past, but for what they say about the enduring allure of the unknown. These historical cold cases are more than puzzles, they're reflections of the societies that shaped them. They show us how power can be both a blessing and a curse, how loyalty can turn to betrayal in an instant, and how even the mightiest empires are built on foundations that can crumble with a single misstep. The deaths of figures like Cleopatra, Socrates, and Genghis Khan aren't just stories of individual tragedy. They are snapshots of entire worlds in flux, moments where history pivoted on the edge of a knife. What makes these mysteries so compelling is that they resist easy answers. Was Ramses III truly the victim of a harem conspiracy, or was his death the result of a deeper, more personal vendetta? Did Zenobia choose death over dishonor, or was her fate sealed by the machinations of Roman politics? These questions linger, inviting us to dig deeper, to question the narratives we've been handed, and to imagine the possibilities that history has left unresolved. As we close this journey through the shadows of the past, let's remember that history isn't just about the facts we know, it's about the mysteries we're still unraveling. These unsolved deaths remind us that the past is never truly settled. It's a living, breathing story that continues to evolve with every new discovery and every fresh perspective. To quote the great historian Herodotus, history is the teacher of life, and in these ancient cold cases we find lessons about ambition, power, and the human condition that resonate as strongly today as they did thousands of years ago. What do you think happened to these legendary figures? Do you have a theory about Alexander's final days or a take on Cleopatra's true cause of death? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation alive. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into history's greatest mysteries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story from the past. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, the past is never as distant as it seems.